Welcome to part 4 of the reactive form tutorial. In the past lecture, we have seen how to capture form data and validate or even restrict to customized inputs. In this lecture, we will see how to create multiple purchase items using form arrays. Form array is basically dynamic forms that we can create using an array of forms. We'll be seeing it now. This lecture is presumably going to be a bit longer, so please bear with me. I'll try to cut short as much as possible. So a form array is basically an array of form groups. So basically now we have only one form group for one form element. But when it comes to dynamic form or form array, this will be inside an array of forms. So put it simply in this way, this will be an array of groups. Okay, so a form array is basically an array of form. We must enable in our form and initialize first. So in this case, right, so we're going to let me kickstart the application. Now, so far we have one line item of particulars, but that won't be the case for our future bills. The expense sheet will include a shop name, bill number and date, and list of particulars, like you might have purchased 3 or more items in one shop. So let's go ahead and add a list of particulars as a form array. So we have a particular here. Now we will be having something called particulars, and that particular will be our form array. So using the form builder instance, we can create an array and we can create a dummy array like this dot create particulars. Now bear with me, we need to create a method to create our items, the groups of forms. So I'm going to just drop down here and then I'm going to create a create particulars method. It will return a form group. Simple as that. Now the return type should be a form builder with a group, and that will contain all the fields that we are talking about. So the amount, the units and everything. So it's like this. Now let's not worry about this, because as we have mentioned that these will be in a list of array, and then it will just keep adding up as we add the items, right? So you need to ignore things like the particular, the rate per unit, quantity and units. You need to ignore these 4 items including the amount for now. So we'll be sorting that out later. And in the template, we need a way to bind our form array to our template under the name called particulars. So let's begin by creating a Angular element ng container, and it must have form array name. Just like how you have the form control name, we can have form array name, and this form array name should be bind to the particulars that we have created as a form array. So this particulars will be bound to template like this, and rest of the elements, we don't need these elements anyway, so let's just leave it like that for now, and then we'll proceed with the loops. So we need ng container, and we need to loop through the loop through the form array. Let p of particulars and controls, because it will hold all the controls as an array for the particulars, like the items, the quantity and the rates. Okay, so this will loop through, and we need let I as index. We need index for sure, because that will give us the index of an array. So we need this to do some validation and do some calculation, right? So and finally we need form group name. Okay, the form group name will be your index. So what this means is we are actually using the numbers, the index, as our form group. So it will be 0, 1, 2, 3, however groups that you're going to create. And this is for the container. And we need to modify this slightly. So everything, like all the particulars, will be inside this array. So I'm going to just copy them. So basically copy all the row and keep it inside. So once we copy all our particulars and quantity and rate per unit inside the ng container for loop section, let's check our application. Looks like we have a failed compilation because the particulars does not exist on AddBill component. That means we need to use a getter function. So something like this. I'm just gonna add it at the end. Let's add a get particulars. It's basically a convenient function that I like to add, but in your method you can try different methods. So this dot expense form dot get particulars. So this will work. I need to add form array from the Angular forms. Now that will do the trick. So what we are saying is this is acting as a property, getter property, and then when you call upon here particulars dot control, It's basically returning the particulars from array to the template. So using that, we can iterate through all the particulars that we have added. So now you see the error is gone. We are getting the particulars line item here because we added one. We created one when we were binding the particular like this, and I will just remove them for now. These ones like the rate per unit, the shop name, we need the quantity and the amount. We don't need them for now, right? And units, yeah. So let's keep it like that for now, and then move on to other things like we need a button to add the items. So whenever we click on the add item, it keeps on adding the line items, the items that we have purchased. Okay, so let's go ahead and add the button for that. The prominent place I'm looking here is we can add a button over here, so that we can place a button over here. So that way it'll be easy for user interaction whenever they click on it, and it keeps adding it. Okay, so in the template, let's go to the bill number, and the bill number is column 4. I will change it to column 2. That's enough for a bill number for now. And I will have a div of class column 2. Button with a button and an event for that. So it says add item as button label. It will throw an error because we need to add our item to our class file. So let's add them here, add item, and it doesn't return anything. So let's keep that as void, and let's call a particulars, and we're going to create empty particulars for now. Okay, it works, and add item is here. So if you click on them, you can start creating all the particulars, the list of items that you have purchased. This is well and good, but we also need a delete button that whenever we click on them, it should delete our items. So let's get cracking on that. And in the inside this array, we should have a delete on each of the line items like this, and near the amount, right? Near the amount field, I'm just gonna copy them. Somewhere I need to reduce it. So probably for the units, now I will reduce it in the particulars. I'll keep them as 4. And here, let's get rid of everything. I'm gonna create a button, type button, and it should be a matte icon button with a click event on delete item of I. Okay, so this is why we need the index. So it denotes like which array element that we are targeting. And inside the button, we need to create a matte icon. Call them as delete. So it will pick out the delete icon for our list. Somewhere something's, yeah, we need to create a delete method for that on delete item. So it's an item index of number. We are not going to return anything, so this will be a void. We can simply use remove at to remove that particular items. Like, so we already got the delete icon, and if you, let's say I type something, let's say you have something in here, so let's say I'm just going to get rid of that, and it's gone. If I click delete, it's gone. Now we need one more piece of information. Like we need to add, whenever we are going to add a quantity and we are setting a unit and a rate for that, we need to get the amount working. So far we didn't have any mechanism to do so. So let's work on that. The amount field will be disabled for now. So whenever we make a change to the rate per unit and to the quantity, this should get triggered. So for example, I'm going to use a change event here on control change event of I. So we need to know which form group that we have targeted, and the same thing will be carried over to the rate per unit. So basically the event that we're talking here is, it will be this entire control that we will be making use of. So let's bind them in our code on control change, and it will have an event of any and item index of number. So this should not return anything, and I'm going to check if event of source element is just a assertion that I'm making here to check whether if there is a source element present, only then proceed further. So and a control name, event source element, the name of the control. So if control name is quantity or control name is rate per unit, we will proceed to calculate amount, okay, with the item index. We need to define the calculate amount index number, item index, and we have a constant of particulars list. This is a getter, so it will get all the particulars that we have as a list, and we need to target that group using the index number. Constant particulars list dot controls. This particulars list will contain list of form groups that I've talked earlier, that these are all basically a list of array of form groups, which is a form array. So item index is necessary to target that particular item that we have changed. The values have been changed, to be precise. So when we do this, we are targeting, actually fetching the exact form group that we have changed when a user changes a value. Okay, silly mistake. It's a boxed one, and now it's fixed. I had the uppercase N, which we shouldn't use, and yeah, we are good now. And constant quantity. So this particular group as a form group, and we're going to get the quantity, and similarly we will get rate per unit and amount. Right, now before proceeding further, I'm going to check assert that if an amount is there, set the value of an amount to null. Just an empty string will be fine. And here we're going to do the business logic, a simple business logic. So what I'm going to do is assert the quantity with a value, not a valid. We need a value of that quantity, and we need value of a rate per unit, and we need to calculate both the values. It's as simple as that. Calculating the quantity with the value will give us the final amount that you have spent for that item. Looks like we fixed the calculation part. Now let's see if there is any issue. Well, we don't have any. Let's say I purchased live chicken with a quantity of 5 kilograms and with a rate of 120, and we get 600 as the amount. Let's put this to test. And I bought cheese, 2 kilograms of cheese. Each were costing 100 and let's say 80. Yes. So the logic is working pretty fine for each line items, for each individual items, and we are really good with that. And we can now set the disable button as disabled and enable them only if the form is valid. Let's say if the form is invalid, we're going to disable them. For that, we can head over to our HTML part. I mean, there are a lot of finesse needed in our template, but for now, to get the reactive form working, we can just do these things for now. Okay, so we can use disable input property, and in here expense form invalid. Now before proceeding further, I'd like to talk a little bit about the pristine invalids and other things. Like they are really important stuff that Angular provides us. So let's check this first. Yeah, you have seen that the save button is disabled. Now the save button will enable only if everything is filled up. Like, let's test it. Yeah, so all the fields satisfy the condition, it will enable. Okay, now let's pick one control. Let's say shop name. Now there are these things like the pristine, touched, value and not value, dirty and untouched and valid. Okay, so these things are the most important, the most used properties for reactive form. They are very, very important in our development. So the pristine is basically tells you that if you're going to touch the form, okay, for the very first time and the value is changed, now the pristine becomes false, which means it becomes dirty and it is tainted. So it stays false forever until the page is refreshed or until the component is reloaded. And same with the dirty. The dirty stays false if you're not going to touch that control. If you're going to touch it, the dirty becomes true. And same with the invalid. If it doesn't satisfy your condition, this one becomes invalid. Invalid is true. So the same logic applies for the entire form group. So the entire form group has maintains this status. So if you see, the invalid is true, and if you modify anything, the invalid becomes false, right? Like so, highlighting here. So these things, the pristine and pristine, dirty, enabled, invalid, they are really handy and helpful in most of the cases in reactive form. If you just verify, or if you do a code review of someone else who has done the reactive form very well, you might have noticed all these things will comes into play. So never ignore this part. You should have dropped this in the previous lecture itself, but my bad, it's my fault. Now I just let it out. Okay, now we need to simulate a form save and update our list in the expense table. So we need a table so that we can whatever that we have saved should be saved in a table. Just we need to simulate them. We're not going to do actual API implementation here. So let's start with it. Before that, we need to have the definition of our a data structure, a shape of our objects, like the particulars, the shop details and expense details. There is no proper shape of our object. To do that, I already have shape of units but not the particulars. So what I'm planning is I just created particulars object shape, like it will have amount, group ID, particulars. Don't get intimidated by this GID and ID. They are just an identification for us to just keep track. Usually this will be from the backend, but we are going to simulate them. And the shop details. The shop details will be like this. The shop details data type will be looking like this. And the expense details, the overall expense details form, it will look like this. All right. I added this amount for some reason, but I think to calculate the overall amount of the bill, let's verify if that's true. Now moving to, let's save this, and there are a couple of adjustments that needed for this form. I have not added a validation for units. That's okay, and for the rate per unit, that's also okay, because as of now we can make use of them here, and there were some issues with the mat error here. So I'm gonna fix that quickly and head over to creating like I said, like we have modified few things like the mat error thing for the form particulars, and while doing the if statement for form array, so I made use of the let p of particulars. So p will be our form group, and I'm getting the particular form control name and checking the errors required. So it is similar to the shop name that we have seen like here, except the reference will be from the form array group, so which is a p on each iteration, and same way used quantity to check the quantity. There is nothing fancy for the rates per unit. This is just a standard one that I've used. And finally, for the amount, I've just used read only, so that we won't be allowing user to enter any values in the amount field. And for the component side, I've done nothing as of now. Let's go ahead and do a quick test. So the quantity always allows us something like this, and units is showing up an error, and rate per unit, some numerals, and the amount is showing, and we can't do an edit. Okay, and same with the particulars is showing up an error, and if you do tap 3 times with the space bar, it show you an error with the space. So things are working, and when you click and you do something for the shop name, and your form is perfectly valid. You can, when you select an add item, again your save button is disabled magically, which means that all these items are needed, they are required. So yeah, once you do that, your save button is enabled. All right, so this part of reactive form is completed, but we need to complete end-to-end implementation. Like when you save it, you should see a table, and you can, when you edit them, you should populate them on your form, so that way we can call it complete. And to do that, now let's head to the app component class file, so which is here, and in here we just created we created all our interfaces. Now let's close them up. We need a mat table, and we need to do view child for that, and let's call them as expense table, as it will ask for a assertion mat table of any. Needs to import the mat table, and couple of things like a raw data list and data source, and the shape of our object, which is I thought it's a list. I don't think so, it's a list. It will be just the data type of particulars, and the data source will be of like this, like the amount, ID, particular quantity. It will look like a flat table anyway. Particulars list with, we should assign an empty array for them. Columns that we need to display. So these are the columns. I already have them. I'm just gonna drop them here. So we will have, there's a mistake. We will have ID, shop name, particular, purchase date, quantity, unit, etc. up to edit. Okay, so this will do for now. And in the init, we need to initialize, or we need to call, and we need to use our mock data. So the data source will hold all the information that we're going to display in a table. So we don't have mock data, we need to define them, I think, and there is a mistake happening. And raw data list, don't worry about them, it's just a mock data information. So I have a list of all the mock data here for now, so we can make use of them just to showcase, and all the errors are gone for now. We need to bind them to our component HTML, and I just copy pasted from my code base. So yeah, it's just a mat table, so I don't need to give more explanation because out of this scope as of now. So we have data source that we're going to show up, and for all the headers, for all the columns, we have ID, particulars, shop name, purchase date, quantity, units, and amount. And for certain field, I think we will be using shop details to shop name because of the shape. Like for the shop details, right? So this is the one that we are going to display as a table. For the shop details, we'll be having a further more information that's extended, like the shop name, purchase date, bill settled, etc. So I think this is pretty much self-explanatory. And when we see, we are getting an error. We forgot to add our onEdit method. Let's add them, which is right over here. Let me add it here. So on edit, we are going to edit a row, and it's of a type particular and of return type void. I think this will do for now. Okay, so whatever you see now is a mock data, so we don't bother about it. But the only thing is this is converted into a flat type array, because what you see here is the Brawler Shop, the Acme, they both, when you click on any of these two, right, so it'll open a pop-up with these two items. Now we should get working on the save part of our dialog. So when you fill up the items and when you click save, we should pass the message to our parent template or component, which is app component. Let's work on that first, which is on the OnAddBill. In the onSave method, we can pretty much comment them, and then I'm going to just do a small check, like the expense form, is it invalid? If it is not invalid, I'm going to do this dialog ref close. But before that, we need to make sure that we have added the dialog ref. So we need to add a reference to our dialog, which is private dialog ref mat dialog ref, and the reference will be the OnAddEdit component. Now let's go down to on save, and it'll be ready. So on close, right, on close, and this dot expense form dot get a raw value. So this way we can pass our information during, if you close the dialog, like you will be passing this, and in the parent component we need to subscribe and listen to that. So in the app component, the OnAddBill is here, and yeah, in this one we need to make sure OnAddBill dialog after closed, there is a method called after closed, and we need to subscribe for that. Let's check what data we are getting, and we need to prepare a data. So I'm going to leave a placeholder, prepare data. So before that, let's check if all our informations or all our statements are working correctly. Purchased a mint with a quantity of 1 pack and the rate is 10, and I purchased yogurt 5 packs or 5 kilograms, let's say 5, and save. And in the app component, I received the data with all the information with 2 particulars. So it's working, and we are getting the information in our app component. The only way is now we need to prepare our data and then start adding stuff. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to call a method called prepare data. Our data will be expense details, from the model. The reason being is, if you have noticed, this is of expense detail data structure. So it looks exactly like the way we created from the expense form group. This is how an expense form group looks. Okay, so that's why we are making use of expense details here, and we'll check whether the data is already present, and we'll check if the particulars are already there. In prepared data, we're going to separate 2 issues here. One is if the data has an ID, and if it isn't. If it doesn't have an ID, it means it's a newly created list of particulars. But if it has an ID, it will be treated as an edit. So I will have is edit mode set to false for now, false as an initial setting. And if the data GID, if there is a GID, group ID, then the edit mode is set to true, which means the data is edited. Okay, in that case, I'm going to truncate two issues here, 2 methods here, modify row, and in the else part it will be add row. So likewise, I'm going to create modify row, add row, and there are a list of other things like on edit row quickly, and see how we're going to populate the data on. So like the prepared data, now I have created a couple of methods, not couple, like 4 methods, like generate unique, add new row, modify row, and get shop details. So it's not really important for now. So in the modify row, I will just call them as a modify row, and it will expect the data as it is, and same with the add new row, and even that will expect our data. So what add new row does is it will create a new row in our table, which is here. It will add one more row after we add our bill. So the way it adds is really simple. So it takes the data and gets the shop details as object, which is over here. It is just creating another set of an object for the shop details and assigning them to the shop details over here. And we are creating a new unique ID. I mean, these are all unnecessary for this lecture, but anyway, I'm just mocking the data here. So setting the group ID and setting the raw data list that we have, these are all for just for the sake of displaying them in the table. All right. So in the particulars, even in the particulars, I'm setting each individual IDs for the list of particulars for these ones, right? So these ones will have a separate individual IDs and pushing them to the particulars list. Now remember, our data table is of a particulars list and it will be stored in the data source data. Okay, this particulars list as a data shape including the shop details. The shop details will be listed as a shop name and the purchase date as well. Okay, right. So for same with the modified row as well. But there are like few things, like what we are doing here is like finding the index of the modified data and then just appending those information once the form is modified. Okay, to complete this we need to add the OnEdit method, otherwise modifying the data will not work. So here I will just call them as found row equals the raw data list contains all the list that has been saved so far. So I will find using the raw data. Raw data is basically raw data is basically in expense details. I think I need to define them, so which could be seen here. Yeah, it's a list of expense details. So we're going to iterate through we're going to find the raw data list, like using the element with a row GID. Something's wrong. Yep. Now once the row is found, something's wrong here again. Yeah, once the row is found, we are going to pass this on OnAddBill event. So OnAddBill will open up the dialog box. We're going to pass the found row. But the problem is the OnAddBill needs to be modified because we haven't changed them, right? So it doesn't accept a parameter. So let's move on to the OnAddBill and modify them. So it could accept a row or it cannot. So we need to modify based on that. So the question mark, the assertion, meaning that you can call this method like without any params, or you can call with the param. Okay, and the row part disable true and min height. Now we have units already and we're going to pass the row here. Okay, so far so good. Now the OnAddBill is complete. The entire flow is complete in app component. Now we need to go to the add edit bill component and capture the row information. That's very important. Otherwise the add bill component doesn't know that you're sending a row data. So we need to focus on that first. Now going to the add edit bill, if you see here, yeah, the data part is this one where we are passing the units. We need to just pass the row as well. So it will be our expense details. And we need to capture that information somewhere here in the in the constructor. We're not going to do ng on in it because once the pop-up is opened up, it will be the constructor that is getting fired. We can also work on the on init. Let's stick with the flow now. So data.row. So in case if there is no row, we're going to just ignore this statement for now. But what if you're going to send some row of data? Okay, so in that case it will be like you're in edit mode. Let's say you're in edit mode. We need to do some actions and here you are in create new mode. In that case you're in edit mode. Now I'm going to do some create a method called populate form. That will make sense. I'm going to populate all the information that you got from the data row into the add edit bill. Okay, so I'm going to just, whenever I click on this, all the information just should fall into this place, right? And the create mode is there is nothing to do here. You just need to call up the particulars getter method and push the information that you have create particulars, and that's more than enough. If I can test it, if we test it, right, it's a new we need to have a closed method. So when you're going to add a new ones, okay, we need to show only one line item. For that, it's a simple fix. We will remove this one and let's leave an empty array and check the new bill. Yeah, so only one line item is there, presented there. We can enable the populate form and then start doing the defining the method. So form, yes, it has a expense details as our interface, and we need to patch the value. So expense form dot patch value. The Angular reactive form gives us set of methods like set value and patch value. Patch value is basically when you're going to set a bulk number of information properties one at a time. So the bill number, bill settle, GID, purchase date, etc, etc. So these information will be patched at once. In our case, we need to add the GID, which we missed it somehow. So GID will be null initially, and so these ones will show you, let's select, yeah, these ones will allow you to populate all the information except the line items, because we are yet to develop the line items, yet to populate the line items. So for that, I will create a method called populate particulars with a data set of particulars type. All right, and this particulars getter method that we created earlier, remember? So the push. And now we have an issue here. We didn't set them to pass parameters or arguments. Okay, but let's finish other things before proceeding there. And in here, the data contains list of particulars, right? So we need to iterate them over. So we need to iterate through all the list of particulars, and I will call them as EL particulars. So this will give out all the elements of particulars. Yeah, populate particulars, and we will pass through all the elements. So this part is over, and in the create particulars we need to modify the argument. So it's either you will be sending a data or you won't be sending. Okay, so we need to modify such that when you're sending a data, we need to add them here, and this will also have ID. So ID data and data.id or null. Oh, sorry, data.id is a ternary operator. So this way, if there is a particulars and particular information has to be created, we'll check for the data. If the data is present, then we are going to check if the data has a ID, then ID, or it will be a null statement here. And same with the rest of the elements over here, right? So I copied over the logic all over the other controls as well. I believe this will work. So let's go ahead and check the edit statement. Let's check with the live chicken one. So once I click the live chicken one, the Acme, the broiler shop, so it shows the shop name and the live chicken. So if you want to add something new, let's say I'm going to add mint to the collections. Let's say I'm going to buy 10 packs of mint with an amount with a rate of 880 rupees, and the broiler shop name to be changed to something else like 2, and the information to 9. Bill number should be something like A, B, C, D, E, and save. Right, so the information is saved. The one that we got has been, we received the information, but this needs to be reflected to our table. So let's work that out. In the app component, we forgot to add prepared data, which is I forgot earlier. So once you do add, this will add our modified data. So let's go over again from the start, right? So this one to 9 and bill number to A, B, C, D. We have added one item, which is a mint quantity of 10 packs or packs, each costing 10, and let's add the quantity. Let's modify the quantity to 3 to 360 and do a save. As you can see, the information is modified, but there are some discrepancies in this because we have added new information which is not displaying. We need to work on that. Since it's beyond the scope of this reactive form session, we can fix that up later on. So far what we have seen is we have seen the adding new element, new form groups to our form array. This is how the dynamic form works. We can delete them, and then we can validate them, validate each form elements. And so we have come to end of this session or the tutorials, like the 4-part tutorial of reactive form, where we have created our own reactive form from the start, and we have seen how to add each and every individual form controls, and we also seen how to set up a validation or validators for each controls, and we even created directives as well as custom validations to our forms. So far we learned all these aspects in just a reactive form session. Not only that, we also went ahead and created a mini application, mini expense management application, which will be useful for some folks out there who wants to create an expense management, not just for a restaurant, or it could be for anything, even for a billing for your roommates or the things that you have purchased under your name. So you can extend this application further using a Firebase, and you can create a simple mini app using that. So I think I started a small starter project for this, and I will share the code base for you guys to use it. By this, I can say that we have finally come to the conclusion that we have completed the Angular reactive form session successfully. So please stay tuned, and thanks for watching Code with Srini. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends, and please do subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Bye bye.